Hi. A
Hello.
very good evening to all of you tuning in to this Facebook Live right here from Pioneer Constituency, and a very good evening to all our Pioneer Constituency residents, as well as friends of Pioneer for joining us in this evening's Connect Pioneer webinar. This evening, for the next hour, we'll be talking a bit more about personal data protection topic, which will be very close to many of your hearts. In fact, in Pioneer Constituency, we started this Connect Pioneer webinar series in light of the current safe management measures and, of course, the various constraints in us doing many of the mass and larger activities and even seminars and forums. So we are doing this powering to you from our Frontier Community Club here. And we have two special guests this evening. We have Rachel as well as Daniel, who is going to beam in live from where he is from. Later, you hear from both of them. But a big thank you to both of them. Both Rachel and Daniel are part of the Singapore Corporate Council Association's Pro Bono Plus Peers Committee. And well, I happen to be also a member of STCA. And we are so thankful for both of them for taking time on this Wednesday evening to join us here to share with us some of the tips, practical tips, pointers, and of course, some background on the topic of personal data protection. So both of them being lawyers and in-house counsels will give you a very good perspective of the personal data protection regime here in Singapore. Something very important, although the Act has been in place quite a number of years already. I recall speaking at the second reading speech when it was introduced in Parliament. And we have gone through a few iterations, including a latest round of amendments just late last year. And well, a very growing and very exciting area with lots of questions and FAQs as well. So today's session in this webinar will be divided into two portions. The first part will be both Rachel and Daniel sharing some of the pointers using a deck from the Personal Data Protection Commission. And then after that, we'll have a Q&A where we'll take questions from all of you. So if you are tuning in, whether it's from our Pioneer Community Facebook page or my personal community Facebook page, you can actually key in your questions at the comments, and we'll try to scan it and try to address it where possible during the Q&A portion. If we can't do it during the Q&A portion, we'll try to bring the information to you and respond to you on the comments page. And do help us to like and share what you're watching this evening so that more of our residents, more of friends of Pioneer can benefit from this session, because we're going to share some very useful tips to help you navigate this whole area of personal data protection. So once again, a big thank you to all of you for tuning in. Please help like and share this so that more people more residents can be kept abreast of some of these developments in the area of personal data protection. And with that, I shall hand the next half hour or so to both Rachel and Daniel, who will introduce themselves and then also share with you some of the points on data protection.
Thank you so much, Patrick. Thank you. And thanks so much for inviting Daniel and I here today to join the Connect Pioneer community to share a bit more about data protection, as you have mentioned. Just some quick background about the SCCA Pro Bono chapter. Basically, we are a community of like-minded team members and people who decided that we want to come together and create more pro bono opportunities for the in-house counsel community to partake in. So our role, our mission is to really either spearhead activities, create new opportunities for pro bono action to happen, or we also do in collaboration with existing pro bono organizations like the Law Society, pro bono clinics and services. So this is something that is close to our heart, and we are really, Danny and I, we are both very happy to be here today to share a little bit more about the data protection regime. So just a quick disclaimer that we need to share. So all the opinions are here as our own, and it's provided really solely for general information, and it's not legal advice or recommendation, and examples that we discuss is purely illustrative. So we go straight into our topic today. So our purpose here really is twofold. The first is that we want to share a little bit more and give more insight as to what is the data protection regime which applies here in Singapore. And I think the audience, you'll be very familiar with this acronym PDPA, the Personal Data Protection Act. And it came to force in 2012. And like what Patrick mentioned, he has recently gone through an amendment just late last year, October last year. So we thought it'd be a timely to do like a reminder session and share a bit more about this. So personal data is important because we use it on a daily basis, right? I mean, we share personal data, and it's important to know how to protect what rights we have over our own personal data so that we can safeguard against any potential misuse. And then our second purpose here is that we want to share practical tips on what we can do to minimize unwanted or unsolicited messages, as well as who you can go to should you fear or should you think that there's been a personal data breach. So what is personal data? I'm going to go to the next page. What is personal data? As a background, personal data is any data which an individual can be identified from, or data which is held by an organization which you can identify or link the individual to. So some examples, your name, right? Your NRIC number, your mobile phone number, and even your biometric indicators like your thumbprint, your iris scan, when you go into the next phase of technology, your medical records. So all these are data which should be private and personal to you. And the question then becomes, what is not personal data? As you can see on the screen, business contact information is not considered as personal data if it's not shared in a personal context. So, for example, your work email, your work address, your work number. To give an example, should I go to a business seminar and I drop my name card with the organizers, right? The organizers can utilize the information on my name card to contact me for publicity of future seminars which they potentially will wanna engage or share with us. So they are not governed for that specific purpose under the PDPA, because business contact information is not considered personal data for the purposes of the PDPA. And just interesting tidbits as to what else is not considered personal data. Data that relates to someone who has passed away for more than 10 years, that's not personal data, or records that has been in existence for more than 100 years. So that is also not considered as personal data. As I mentioned previously, why is a personal data important? I mean, now, especially in this age where we use technology on a daily basis, we go on to Lazada, Redmart to purchase our groceries, do some online shopping. We use the platforms available online and do a lot of transactions. And in it, we key in our numbers, our address, our credit card information, and we want to know that there's a regime in place that will govern the collection, use, and disclosure of personal data. So that's why it's good to be aware. Information is knowledge, and that's what we are here to share today. We also want to talk about let's move on to the next page. Yeah, we also want to talk about how does the PDPA apply to you and I, individuals like you and I. It's a regime that will allow us to safeguard our interests better because the PDPA applies to private sector organizations unless the exemptions apply. And I will share a little bit more about the exemptions later. The PDPA is meant to set up a protection regime where organizations are supposed to abide by requirements and have in place secure measures to ensure that your personal data is not misused or taken without your consent, right? There are certain situations where organizations are not required to seek your consent first before using your personal data. And that is, for example, where it is used in a private or domestic context. So if I'm an individual that is using this data on my Instagram, for example, I take a photo with two of my friends and I posted it on my Instagram. In this situation, I don't really need to ask my friends, hey, can I have your consent to put the photo on my Instagram, because I'm using it in a personal and domestic capacity. So that's one. The second situation is if I'm an employee working for my employer. I'm not subject to the PDPA per se. My employer is the one that will need to abide by the various laws and regulations that will impose the data protection regime that they need to comply with. And also one big carve out would be public agencies. So the PDPA doesn't apply to public agencies. They have their own set of data protection rules and regulations which they have to abide to, which is equivalent, if not more stringent than what the PDPA provides for. So public agencies are also excluded from the purview of this. One thing that I would want to mention is that private sector organizations which provide services to public agencies, whether as data controllers or data intermediaries, they are subject to the PDPA depending on which role they undertake. So they have obligations that they need to satisfy under the data protection regime. This also will be useful to mention about publicly available information. If information is publicly available, then even if it's personal data, organizations can potentially use it without seeking an individual's consent. So let me give an example. I'm on a social media network platform and my profile is public. I post photos that can be seen by everyone. Anyone can add me as a friend if they search my name on the profile of the social network. They can easily find me. So in this situation, like all my videos, my photographs, right, that I post on such social media network, potentially, and the likelihood is that organizations don't actually have to seek my consent because it's publicly available information. Conversely, let's say Daniel, which my counterpart is going to be speaking later. Daniel is on the same social media network, but he keeps his profile private. Only people who knows how to search for him can request to add him, and it's for him to accept. All his posts or his profile pictures are also private to people that has added him as a friend or added him into the network. In that situation, that kind of information will not be considered as publicly available information, and any organizations who want to utilize such information would have to seek consent. So Daniel will be sharing a little bit more later about what is the specifics of the PDPA that helps protect individuals like you and I, and what are the benefits of the PDPA that is like set up on the screen here now. And I thought, it's useful to know that the PDPA is not just an act that's in place. It actually has application and implementation that comes along with it. So there's been data breaches that happened along the way from time to time. And I thought it would be useful to share a few of these examples of such data breaches that has happened. So the one that I think will come to mind for most of us is what happened in 2018, where there was a cyber attack on SingHealth's patient database, where more than 1.5 million of non-medical records of individuals was actually taken or accessed. And then we have like 160 patients' medical records of what medicine they have dispensed that has been accessed because of this cyber attack. So in this situation, the parties involved, in this case, it's SingHealth and IHIS, the private sector organizations, and they both were slapped the fine. For SingHealth, it's 250,000, and then for IHIS, it's 750,000, because there's found PDPC found that there were lapses in their processes, and this is a penalty that was a financial penalty that was imposed. And another example would be when Singtel was doing some data migration to a new billing system, and in the process, they realized that there was a gap and a potential of some of their customers' information being assessed. I think a few hundred being assessed during that period where they're doing the migration, and they were fined, I think, $9,000 because they actually did put into place stopgap measures to prevent further data breaches. So there are a lot of considerations that come into place when deciding what is the financial penalty that will apply. But the key is that this is something that's being taken seriously here in Singapore, and the PDPA, which is the the Personal Data Protection Commission, they will take to task any potential data breaches which causes serious harm or impact individuals like you and I. The PDPA covers electronic, non-electronic information, so it's meant to really address and protect all personal data as long as it's covered under the definition. And lastly, I would say that the PDPA applies alongside the existing written laws that are already in place, and it's not meant to override the existing laws. It's complementary, and should the existing laws have any inconsistency, then it will prevail over the PDPA. So to give an example, the banking secrecy laws under the Banking Act that governs customer information that is given to banks, that will apply. And if there's any inconsistency, the banking law would apply over the PDPA. And I think now is a good time for Daniel to share a little bit more about what you can do to actively be in management and control of your personal data, and what organizations are obliged and when they're obliged to seek your consent when it comes to obtaining your personal data. Over to Daniel, please.
Thank you, Rachel. Hi, everyone. Very good evening to you. First of all, I just want to share a few points further to what Rachel has said. What is the protection provided by PDPA? I will just have 5 points to share with you. First is you must provide your consent, i.e. meaning, sorry, can I move to the next slide? Thank you. Collecting organizations must tell you clearly what is the intent and the purpose for which then to collect, disclose, and use your personal data, right? And your consent is required before they can rightfully collect your data. And the organization cannot deceive you by giving you misleading information, by deceiving you to hide the real intention of them to collect your data. And further point is your consent cannot be obtained as a condition of providing a product or services beyond what is reasonably necessary. For example, let's say if I want to sign up a membership of a bookstore, right? I don't expect them to ask me for my medical history, medical records, etc. Right? So that is just to illustrate on the point that the collecting organization should not collect your personal data as a condition of providing the product or services beyond what is necessary. And further, if you have willingly provide your personal data for a particular purpose, you are also allowed the organizations to use your personal data necessary to complete your purchase. In other words, your consent is not needed in such situations. Basically, there's what we call the deemed consent, is whereby when the data is voluntarily given by you and is reasonable to believe that you would voluntarily provide the data to the collecting organizations. At this juncture, let me give you 2 examples to illustrate the point. First example, let's say you sign up for a gym membership, right? So at the first step, you need to provide your personal data, personal information for the purposes of signing up the membership. Of course, in today's context, a lot of this can be done electronically, so that possible that you may key in your personal information through whether the mobile or the computer at the gym membership, or you may be filling up the information in a hard copy form. But the key point here is you have to expressly to give your consent to fill up your personal information to the gym operator for the purposes of processing your membership. So in this case, it's clear that we need to give a consent. We need to consent before they can, process our membership by obtaining our personal data. So let's pause here. We will fast forward to a situation of deemed consent. So let's say you have completed your filling up your personal information. You go to the cashier counter to make payment, right? And then you take out your credit card and hand it over to the cashier. And at this juncture, the cashier will not be asking for your consent before accepting your credit card details, because you have deemed consented to provide your credit card handed over to the cashier for the purposes of making that payment. So hope that quick illustrations can help you to understand a little bit more about consent and deemed consent in your daily activities. Also, I'd like to give an example to illustrate on this point. Following from what Richard has said, nowadays online shopping is very common. Right? Let's say I want to buy something from an e-platform, e-commerce operator. So as a starting point, I would need to sign up for an account, right, in the respective e-commerce platform. So I would need to enter my personal data into the platform, right? i.e., I need to give consent for the platform to collect my personal information. So pause here for a while. Let's fast forward to when I have completed my purchase. So I have selected the mode of delivery to deliver to my home address instead of what we call self-pickup or self-collect. So at this juncture, when the e-commerce operator want to deliver the goods to your house, he will need to hand over your personal information, i.e. your home address, to the courier service provider. But the e-service provider will not need to get your consent again before they furnish your personal information. In this regard will be your name, your address to the courier service provider to complete the delivery, because you have deemed have consented to provide your addresses, and these are the information that required by the courier service provider to complete your transaction to deliver the goods to your home. So I hope that these two examples will give you some, some pictures on what consent and deemed consent mean in this regard in the course of our daily activities. Of course, there are other situations whereby the consent is not needed when organization collects your personal information. For example, let's say an insurance company is collecting personal information of his customer for preventions of fraud, right, purposes, right, fraudulent claims. So in such situations, the consent of the respective customer of the insurance company is not needed for that purpose. And of course, there's other example. For instance, you have to your personal information have to be obtained for vital interest purposes. So in such situations, you will not need to obtain your consent before the collecting agency collect your personal data. Sorry, organizer, can you move to the next slide? Then following from there, another right you have under the Act is you can withdraw your consent, right? At any point in time, you can give a reasonable notice to the company to indicate your intention to withdraw your consent. And of course, the organization will also need to inform you of the likely consequences of your withdrawal and cease collecting, using, and disclosing your personal data. And also, one more point, the third point is you are in control of your personal data, because under the PDPA, the company have to furnish you with a contact person, i.e. contact point, whom can answer any questions you have to them regarding the collection, disclosure, and the usage of your personal data. So this is what we usually call the privacy inbox, where if you have any question pertaining to the collection, use, and disclosure of your personal data collected by the company or organization, you can always reach out to them to furnish your question to them. The next point is organization. If I may to move to the next slide. The next point is you can have right to access to your personal data, and also you can correct it if you're wrong, if the data is wrong. You can check how your personal data is disclosed, being used for the past year from the organization that collected your personal data. So at this juncture, I also want to mention a few obligations that the organization that have collected your data. First, they have what we call, they have the accuracy obligations, meaning they have the obligation to make sure, to ensure that the personal data collected from you is accurate. Second, they have the protection obligations, meaning they have to ensure that there is a reasonable effort to protect your personal data from unauthorized access or data leakage. The next one is they also have the retention obligation, meaning they can only retain the personal data collected from you as long as it's required to fulfill the business or the legal purpose, right? Meaning when it's not required anymore, they ought to delete the personal data collected from you. And the last obligation they have is, of course, the transfer obligations, meaning if your personal data need to be transferred out of Singapore, they need to ensure that you have the level of comparable protection of your personal data in a foreign jurisdiction as it is in Singapore, right? If I'm sorry, organizer, you want me to move to the next slide? The last point, the fifth point I want to share with you is, since last year, there is the obligations to notify the authority whenever there is a data breach occur. And I will not go into the details of what is classified as what we call that notifiable breach, whereby the organization have to notify the breach to the authority, which is the Personal Data Privacy Commissioner. But I just want to share with you quickly a few things that what you would expect if, for instance, if you are notified from the organization that collected your personal data that inform you there is a data breach occur. So in short, data breach meaning that the data that they collected from the customer, right, the people, their leakage of the data either is lost, either they are being hacked, meaning your personal information that you provided to the organization are now made available to other people beside the organization. So in such case, if you are being informed of a data breach by the organizations, you should take necessary steps advised by the organization to safeguard, to ensure security of your personal data. For example, if let's say the personal data in question in breach is your password and username, and you should, in the first instance, upon notified by the organization, should quickly change your password to ensure that your account is fully secure and not continue to be used by, for example, the hacker. Second is the financial information. Let's say the information in breach is your credit card details, right? And then you should, at the first instance, upon notified by the organizations, right, take reasonable steps, follow the advice by the organizations, i.e., for example, you can call the bank to suspend or even to cancel your credit card just to safeguard your own interests. So this is the 5 key points I just want to share with you on the protections you have conferred under by our PDPA. If I may to move to the next slide, organizer. So you will see from a slide here what you call the DPPM logo, meaning Data Protection Trust Mark logo. So as a consumer, when you see an organization with this DPPM logo, it's kind of like a form of assurance that will give you confidence that to transact with this organization because they have accountable data protection practices to safeguard your personal data, and only organizations that we awarded by this the DPPM logo by the Info Media Development Authority, the IMDA, can that can show this logo that they have, this what we call DPPM trust mark. So this is also one of the tips that as a consumer, when before you decide whether to continue with transact with a certain organization, this is like a kind of assurance that you have this organization have the accountable practices in terms of protecting, safeguarding your personal data that you handed over to them. And if I want to go to the next point, which is the do not call registry. In short, we call it DNC. Sorry, organization. Next slide, please. Yeah, another way to for the consumer like you and I, we can take to control to reduce the amount of unsolicited messages that you receive is by utilizing the DNC register, what we call do not call registry. So all in all, in short, the DNC is a database, where you have an individual 8-digit Singapore account. You can call in, register in that to opt out from receiving any kind of unsolicited marketing messages. And upon register to the DNC registry, so basically you are actually informed the respective person that you have actually opt out from all the unsolicited marketing messages. There are three type of DNC registry that are available here in Singapore. One is the no voice call register, meaning that once you register, you should not be receiving any unsolicited marketing call. The other one is a DNC message register, meaning upon registering, you will not receive any unsolicited SMS for the unsolicited marketing messages. And the third one, of course, is the no fax messages DNC. That speaks for itself, meaning that you will not getting any unsolicited fax marketing messages. There are three methods to register for the DNC register. One is you can register it online, in the DNC register website. Second, you can send an SMS to the DNC number 78771, and a guided menu will be sent to your phone to select your DNC preferences. And the third one is you can register by phone call. You can see from the slide, right? There's a toll-free number there, start with 1,800, whereby you can register for the DNC for do not call voice register. Typically, once you have registered for the DNC, you should stop receiving any sorts of messages, unsolicited marketing messages after 21 days after you register to the DNC register. You may ask, what will be the exception, right? What call will you still receive after you register in the DNC register? So one of the situations carved out from the DNC register, which is what we say B2B marketing calls, meaning like business to business. Let's say it's a marketing between businesses, right, not to individual. So that is actually not under the purview of DNC register. So meaning if any of you are using a mobile phone for work and personal purposes, so in that case, likely that despite you have registered the DNC register, but you will still be receiving unsolicited messages, of course, because you actually use your personal mobile for two purposes, both for work and for personal purposes. Last point, I just want to touch upon that, regarding the offense. Any company, any organization, if you find to violate the DNC provisions, is actually liable for a fine of $10,000 per offense. So it's actually will be a very expensive call of messages. So that's all I want to share with you for this session. Rachel, I hand it over to you. Thank you.
We are back online.
Yeah, so if there is, if you receive any unsolicited text messages and calls related, to loans or online gambling, this is what is showing on screen now is where you can notify the police directly, and what is the numbers that you can call to ensure that you inform the police that this unsolicited messages is going to you so that they can take the correct actions. We hope that this discussion has been helpful, and this sharing session has been something that will give a bit more insight to what is the PDPA data protection regime that applies. And if there's any questions, actually, there's a great online resource under the PDPC, the Personal Data Protection Commission website. That will be the next page, the PDPC website, where you can access a lot of very good information. For example, like the presentation that you have seen today, that's also online, publicly available on the PDPC website. You also have YouTube videos, great community outreach engagement, and lots of very, very informative info flyers, info sheets that you can refer. And should you want to have more detailed information, they also have 126 pages of the advisory of the latest PDPA that applies. And all of this easily available from the PDPC website. So if any questions, you can also always reach out to the PDPC via email and give them a call if you have more questions that you want to check on and understand better.
Yeah, I just want to chime in and say, Rachel, you're absolutely correct. So you see that web link, www.pdpc.gov.sg, extremely useful website to go to, especially when you find out more. Even as a layman, as wanting to get more information, you can be a business owner or SME owner to find out how to set up a data protection framework for a company, including freelancers who want to find out about some of the personal data protection information and laws. They are all available quite generously on the PDPC website. Even myself, as a practitioner, do also make a lot of reference or go visit that site too to pick up useful information. For example, like they usually release some of their assessments or their grounds or decisions whenever there's a issue or legal issue or an enforcement issue over a breach of the Personal Data Protection Act. So a lot of useful information and even case notes are out there for you to refer to them. And what Rachel mentioned, a lot of nice infographics as well, which are great for reading and for just reference, even as a layman or even as someone who want to find out more about personal data protection. So yeah, so that's the all the information that we have been sharing. A bit legal, but we have many thanks to Rachel and as well as Daniel for trying to make it as simple to understand as possible. Not to worry, if you miss any of this evening's webinar, you can replay the webinar again or do a watch party of sorts. And for those who have just joined in, don't worry, you can rewatch this later on because we are powering this live from Frontier Community Club to all of you, our Pioneer residents as well as friends of Pioneer. We are doing this live on this Connect at Pioneer series. It's a monthly webinar which we do on useful topics and information to be shared for our residents and many of our friends. Yeah, so it's powered through our Pioneer Community Facebook page, as well as through my personal community page. And again, a big thank you to many of you who have actually, posted some of the questions that you have, some burning questions. I have it on my phone here. And now we will segue nicely to the Q&A portion. So Daniel is on hand to answer some of these, as well as Rachel here with me. And well, I'll just kick it off because we only have like 20 minutes left before it hits 9. And I just wanted to run through some of the questions that came in from some of our residents who tune in. Firstly, Maylin asked about how to ensure removal of data that has been collected after it's been used. As you know, there's a collection, use, and disclosure requirements and obligations that come with it. So maybe Rachel and Daniel, you answer that question.
Sure. Daniel, you want to take this question, Daniel?
Sure. Thanks, Rachel. So thanks, Patrick, for the question. So we assume that the question being asked is, how organization that collected our personal data to ensure that they delete after use. So in this case, the PDPA provides that the organization that collected the personal data only can retain it for the duration that they need it for business or legal purposes. However, the Act does not provide like a period because bear in mind that they're very difficult to have a one-size-fits-all kind of solution in this regard. Then I think you have to go back to some key points, the key pointers here, i.e., you have to first see whether the organization have what is their data retention policy, right? I.e., they keep their information for how long, and once it's not needed, they should have review it periodically and remove the data. And following just one quick example, for instance, let's say your company is hiring, right? They interview a few candidates, right? Some candidate, let's say not recruited, so rightfully they have collected all the personal data like your CV, your resume, etc. So for those that are not selected, usually company will keep it for a duration of time, perhaps 2 years, 3 years, just a ballpark figure, right? And then thereafter, the HR department should review periodically whether such data is needed or not. So this is just one, broad answer to that. For example, that's the extreme cases. A company, whether or not they have a good reason to keep the personal data of the candidate and not recruited for a period of 10 years. So yeah, versus you keep for 2 years. So yeah, so by and large, there's no definite answer, but whether is it reasonable for the organization to continue to keep the data that no longer needed. Thanks, Patrick.
Thanks, Daniel. Yeah, we're doing some transition here. On site. So thanks, Daniel, for answering not just my question, but also the next question another resident had. Talking about in employment situations, whether it's a headhunter or an employment agency or someone, a prospective employer looking at candidates. You will need to submit sometimes a CV and some personal data may be inside, and therefore, how long can you keep use. This actually brings to my mind a recent case that came up in the newspapers, if you recall, and reported about handling of personal data of a particular employee in the employment agency kind of setting. So do take note that whoever that collects, use, or disclose on your data will have some whole series of obligations under the Personal Data Protection Act to safeguard and to ensure it does not land into the wrong hands.
Yeah, absolutely correct there. And for recruitment agencies, because they are public sector organizations, actually by right they are not allowed to ask for your NRIC. NRIC is only can only be obtained by private sector organizations for very specific purpose. If they have a need to really verify your data to exactness, to make sure that it's really you. Otherwise, there will be harm that is caused, or if it's required for compliance with the law. So for example, if I check in a hotel, usually I need to show my ID for verification purposes, or if I go to a clinic, I also need to do so because there are actually laws in place that requires such organizations to ensure the veracity of our identity. But besides that, by right, recruitment agencies, they shouldn't be, recruitment firms, they shouldn't be asking for NRIC. And for employment agencies, there's an act, a regulation which requires employment agencies to collect personal data, NRIC, if your pay is above $3,300. So there's a specific obligation to comply with the law. Only in such situations can you actually request for the NRIC record.
Yeah, thanks, Rachel, for that. Actually, another question. Many of you would be very familiar because sometimes when you go to the nearby supermarket, whether at Jurong Point or even NTUC and other kind of a lot of the online e-commerce platforms as well. A lot of some of these contests and raffles and lucky draws. Maybe in a share. Sometimes they ask for IC numbers and other more personal information like your handphone number, your address, and what's your take, Rachel?
So they are in a lucky draw or a raffle or a contest. Sometimes you hear on the radios, right? They have a radio contest. In those situations, they shouldn't be asking for your NRIC number. They can potentially request for a partial NRIC, which is the last 3 digits with the letter at the end for identification purpose. And you know, when you participate in a contest, if you win, you wanna actually get the prize. So for such verification purposes, for your name, your mobile number, your email address, that's commonly asked as identifiers besides the NRIC. So in summary, you don't have to provide your full NRIC for the purposes of participating in such contests, and only partial NRIC if really needed, or your other personal data which you must consent to giving. And once you give your consent, actually those organizations have obligation to protect and ensure there's no unwarranted disclosure of such personal data. When you go and collect a prize, and I know that we all hope that happens to us, we go and collect our prizes, right? The organizations may ask to see your NRIC just to check that it's you, and that is okay. They just have sight, but they shouldn't be taking a photocopy or photo of your NRIC in those situations.
Yeah.
Another relevant point, I think, is car park redemption, right? You know, it's nice to get free parking from time to time. So when redeem car park, you don't have to put your NRIC as well. It's just really either your car vehicle number, perhaps your mobile number for the purpose of registration for that free car park, or memberships in shopping centers. Also, again, not something that requires you to provide NRIC. NRIC is something that is very unique to every one of us. And when we engage in transactions, especially using our SingPass or in relation or with government public agencies, it's something that is very important. So as much as possible, let's try not to use our NRIC unless it's required for verification purposes as required under the law.
Yeah, that's right. I've been, in a way, I've also been watching many of these lucky draws and contests like supermarkets and e-commerce platforms. And I think they themselves probably know the PDPA as well. And therefore, if you notice, most do not these days ask for your NRIC number. They ask probably the last 3 digits and the alphabet.
Yeah.
So I think that's the general practice. So if you just be on your guard. When people ask for your personal data, I tend to get a bit suspicious. Well, the other one is also like banks. Earlier, Rachel alluded to banks governed by the Banking Act to get data and information for you because of certain of the internal compliance requirements could be required by the Monetary Authority of Singapore or other necessary kind of screenings you need to do to open accounts, etc. So maybe any banks, besides getting your NRIC number, any other areas we need to look out for as residents get phone calls from banks and credit card companies?
Okay, so for banks, is there a boundary to what they can ask you? So can they ask for all of your personal data? I think the answer to that will be no. There are boundaries for the personal data which they request from you, and it's context specific. It depends on what is the services that they are providing to you and what you're engaging the bank with. So to take for example, if it's a housing loan, right, they need to know what is your liability. So they may ask you for your financial information, what is your current liabilities, even potentially what the debts that you have. All of this, it's reasonable in the context of what is the service that they are providing you with, because they need to assess what is your loan quantum, whether you hit the loan to value ratio, for example. So all these are context specific, but it must satisfy the reasonableness test. And that's also something that is captured in the PDPA. The personal data which they request from you should be reasonable. If you're applying for a credit card and you wanna have a supplementary credit card for your kids or for your spouse, then in that context you also may provide personal data of your immediate family members. But in those situations, it's also reasonable to ask for. But banks are regulated by MAS, and it's a variety of statutes and regulations, including the PDPA. So they do have an obligation to ensure that your personal data is properly protected. And that is something that I think we all breathe easy to know that nobody can just know what is our assets and how much money we have in our bank accounts. Yeah.
And there's another question coming in. It asks about, how about in the office or workplace context? Sometimes the human resource may ask for your personal data beyond the usual personal data. Is this allowed, or can you don't agree to do that? Maybe Daniel or yourself want to share a bit.
Sure. Let me take that question. Thanks, Patrick. So the starting point is for the purposes of employment, the company actually can use the right to ask and use your personal data for the purposes of managing and terminating the employment. As to the question, what it is required, whether the company can ask any personal information beyond what you needed for work, I think that is it depends on the context. For instance, let's say once you're hired by the company, so it's reasonable to assume that they will need your bank account number. So though it's a sensitive information, but I don't think anyone do not want to furnish the bank account information to the employer. The second point is what are other information that they ask? For instance, can the company ask you for your past medical records, medical history? On the surface, it's not, right? If your job it doesn't require, not within the scope. But however, if let's say it's in the context of the company want to purchase your corporate insurance or your life insurance to cover you or your family members, and then it's rightful to ask your past medical history, right, for the purposes of purchasing the corporate insurance for you. Another common example is something that not in the ordinary course of work. For example, let's say you have the company outing. Sorry, I think this is pre-COVID, right? Since 2 years we would not have this. Let's say a company outing, you have photograph, right, taken. If a company want to show your photograph in the intranet and shown to, let's say, all other employees, whether if let's say you are a company of operating more than one jurisdiction, you want to share with your subsidiary outside Singapore, etc. So those are the things generally the company will need your consent before they can actually publish your photo in those platforms, intranet, etc. Because that is generally not required to manage this is not information that they need to manage the employment, your employment with them. Thanks, Patrick.
I think the company should at least let you. Sorry.
Okay.
So I was going to add that at the very least, the company should inform the employees that they're using your personal data, like what Daniel mentioned, right? Put your photo on the intranet, so they should at least inform you and notify you that that is what they are actually doing. So that's the notification obligation on the part of the company itself.
Yes, that's right. And there's another question coming in, asking about a do not call registry, the DNC registry. I know because I do get some of these spam calls as well. So be extra careful. Just be mindful of that. But although there's a question that although I put my number on the DNC register, so that technically I'm not supposed to get any more of these like marketing or sales calls, but I still receive some of these like offering loans or football bets and stuff like that. Earlier on, Rachel alluded to some of the channels that you can call. So what's your experience on this? If one of our residents gets some of these calls, how do we take proactive steps there to alleviate this challenge?
I think Daniel mentioned earlier, she shared a bit more in your stuff as well, Patrick, about the DNC registry. You put your number there. By right, that should filter off some of the unwanted and unsolicited messages. But there are some messages that can still go through people who, organizations who may not be based in Singapore. They may just have a number internationally nowadays. Numbers can easily obtain. Just send you such information. As a second line of defense after the DNC registry, actually all our phone functions have this block caller function. So that's something that we can actually do. We can block the caller. Or if it's a scam, and we are aware of scam, one of the slides that shown earlier, we can contact and inform the correct authorities of this is happening. There's a scam going on. Someone's trying to lend me money. Make the correct notification so that actions can be taken to stop this errant organizations from contacting you. The DNC registry is not, it doesn't stop all unwanted messages, but it's definitely a good filter to start with, I think.
Yeah. There was one question on scam, this final question on scams. I thought, I do a sort of a commercial break for everyone who is tuning in. I think it's very, very important. In fact, in the Pioneer community, we are looking at organizing a webinar to educate everyone on scam prevention, because in our interactions with some of the activists in the fintech space, and of course also with the Singapore Police Force. I actually caught up recently with the anti-scam unit in the Singapore Police Force, and I thought use this opportunity this evening, since we're talking about personal data protection and guarding your personal information, not just your personal information, but a lot of personal details carefully, to be extra mindful. The anti-scam unit was sharing with me, no one is bad. Yeah, everyone says, oh, only the seniors probably they're a bit more gullible, but it's not true. You have professionals like lawyers, doctors, even professors being scammed. So everyone may fall prey. So do look out for them. Now they come in various shapes, forms, and sizes as well. Yeah, because particularly so in the last 15 months, where we are all on e-commerce platforms, we are all on social media, we're all in the virtual space, we're all responding to emails, and it's quite well, if you're in this line of business, I'm told, you really you really marvel at the amount of information that's moving across the virtual space. And mind you, the virtual space is around the world. It's not just within Singapore. It's really outside of jurisdiction, across many parts of the world. If we buy things, yeah, could be from another country, nearby country, or far away country. So, and they come from various parts of the world. So it's going to be very, very tricky. Be extra careful. Be on the lookout, because I know I saw the police annual report on crime statistics. In fact, generally crimes have gone down in Singapore, but actually some of these online scams have gone up quite exponentially in the last couple of years, particularly fueled by the fact that we are now more digitalized and really many of us on e-commerce platforms as well, and doing a lot of, even particularly banking digitally, and using various apps to do transactions with our personal data. So do please be extra careful. I think Daniel and Rachel will join me in advising each and every one of you tuning in to be mindful of this, because they can come in form of calls, phishing emails, etc., etc. And the next thing you know, you are spammed or you are scammed in more ways than one. So be extra careful whenever there's a request for your personal data, there's a request for PIN numbers, there's a request for you to open certain mails. They are so surreptitious, and I've seen some. They look exactly like it could be from. You think that it's from Facebook, but actually it's not from Facebook. It could be from Insta, but actually not from Insta. They kind of mirror the emails and some of the logos so realistically and with such high resolution. So do be extra careful and be on the lookout, and don't be a victim, because anyone may fall prey to some of these perpetrators. And on that note, a big thank you to Rachel, and of course Daniel tuning in from where he is, and of course a group of community volunteers who are helping to run this entire Connect at Pioneer series. A big thank you to them for doing it. And actually, before we end this evening session, besides doing a watch party after this live webinar, please help us to like and share, so that more residents, more friends of Pioneer can benefit from this evening sharing from both Rachel as well as Daniel and our Q&A. And we're going to have some upcoming events. In fact, tomorrow I'll be back here in Frontier Community Club at lunchtime to share a bit about adapting the new normal. And of course, we are partnering Headhunt for a brown bag series, also part of our initiative in the area of legal employment employability at Pioneer, LEAP for short. Partnering, and then we are getting one of the professors sharing about marketing after COVID, and a series of brown bag topics in partnership with Skills Future Singapore. I think it will be very, very useful for each and every one of our residents who have a bit of spare time, have a lunch break, turn it on your smart devices, and while you're having lunch, tuning to us and hear what we have to say, and pick up some useful tips and handles as we navigate this whole new future of work and next normal for each and every one of us. And also upcoming, we have a breast cancer screening in partnership with the Jurong Medical Center as well as the Breast Cancer Foundation, and we want to really look out for our residents. I know we are so busy. We have been fighting fires at home in more ways than one. Yeah, whether it's working from home or looking after or home-based learning for many of us. So may have skipped your annual screenings and health screenings. So we're bringing this service to each and every one of you, our residents. So do scan the QR code that's available here. If you miss the QR code, don't worry, you can replay this video again after we end this live webinar, and to register and do your screenings right here in the heart of Pioneer community. And with that, we also want to ask all of you to do a feedback for our this evening's webinar. Earlier on, Rachel and Daniel alluded to some of the useful materials on the PDPA website, but a copy of the earlier shared presentation materials are available for downloading. You can scan the QR code that you see on screen, and at the same time, also we'll be very, very grateful if you can provide some pointers and feedback on what you want to hear in our Connect at Pioneer live webinar series. We've been organizing a whole series of them. I kind of lost count from the whole total of topics across different important areas that concern many of us, whether it's our lives, our livelihoods, or us moving ahead in the next normal. So do give us your suggestions on the suggested topics. We'll find friends of Pioneer to join us at these live webinars to share their expertise and their expert sharing and opinion with all of us. And on that note, I hope you all had a great session this evening. Continue to like and share this particular Connect and Pioneer webinar so that more friends and family members as well, and even neighbors can get to know more about personal data protection in Singapore. And on that note, a big thank you again to Rachel and Daniel, who's tuning in, but you can't see him on screen now, but he's still on Zoom. And thanks to both of you for joining us this evening and for taking time to share such useful knowledge for all our residents. And until our next Connect at Pioneer series, see you again. Have a great evening.